Hi, Disciple Bible Study, Lesson 28, Freedom, the Book of Galatians, Grace and the Law. When the Pharisees ruled Judaism, they put great burdens on the backs of the believers. There were over 600 laws that the people had to obey, and they measured whether or not they were a good Jewish person by whether or not they followed the law. When Jesus came, he was the fulfillment of the law. It didn't mean that our behavior didn't matter anymore, but it meant that we were no longer justified by works of the law, but now we're justified by faith in Christ. The Galatians had forgotten this, and they had gone back to the law, to having lists of rules that people should follow. Let me read a couple of excerpts from Galatians in chapter 3:1. You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. He's being sarcastic. Did you receive the Spirit by observing the law or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After being begun in the Spirit, are you now trying to attain your goal by human effort? And then in Galatians chapter 1, I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. It is so easy for Christian people to gravitate back to a set of rules. After all, following a set of rules is easier than living by faith. If I tell you, here's the list of 8 things that you must do to be a good Christian, then it's easy. I just follow them and I'm okay. But when I have to actually take responsibility for what it means to be a loving, living, live specimen of the grace of Christ, that's got some questions about it. That has some difficulty with it. Jesus smashed the rule of law. He smashed the Pharisees' practices and beliefs. He healed people on the Sabbath. In Luke chapter 7, he talks about how the Pharisees rejected John the Baptist, and he, wore camel's hair and ate locusts and just was a hermit. They rejected him, even though he lived in all of these righteous, sort of pious ways. And they also reject the Son of Man, saying that he's a glutton and that he eats with sinners and he drinks too much. And Jesus was not worried about people's lists of rules. Legalism today is alive and well. All of you know someone who can tell you who the good ones are and who the bad ones are. In fact, unfortunately, some of us in this room have probably spent time in our lives deciding who the good ones were and the bad ones were and telling folks who the good ones and the bad ones were. Now, is that a tongue twister or what? There's a story about a woman who got fed up with religion and decided that she would make up her own. And so she and her secretary were the only ones that were involved in this new religion and had it all down. And the woman was being interviewed by a reporter one time about her new religion, and the reporter asked, so you and your secretary, Mary, you guys are the only adherents to this. And the woman said, yeah, and lately I'm not sure Mary's doing that well. It's so easy for us humans to point the finger at others. And it's so easy for us to pull biblical passages out of context to judge and condemn and hurt others. A great example of this is the whole Fred Phelps Church from Topeka, the Westboro Baptist Church. But there are a lot of denominations and a lot of Christian people who very easily head back into the law by making lists and deciding who the good ones and the bad ones are. Jesus never did that. He put his arms around people wherever they were at. The prodigal son is welcomed as he's coming home. The father rushes out to meet him. At this point, there's no apology. And the son isn't coming home because he's repentant. He's coming home because he's hungry. But what is modeled by the father in this story is a welcoming, unconditional love. The woman at the well in John chapter 4, Jesus knows she's had 6 husbands, and the man she's living with now is not her husband. He doesn't say to the woman, go get married to the man you're living with, or go back and marry the first husband you were married to. He simply talks to her about the living water. And the Christ that we see in the Gospels lives beyond rules and loves the people. Now, I'm not advocating, and when we start talking about grace, there is a philosophy called antinomialism. It means against law. It means that there are no laws. It's a heresy in the church that kind of says that do whatever you want. Since we're not under the law, do whatever you want. Anything goes. And I would not advocate that. I do not believe in that. But what I would say to you is that the rules that we follow, the morals that we do follow, we don't follow them because someone made a law. We follow them because of love, because of God's grace in our heart. The problem with following the law is it discredits salvation. If we follow the law and we think we're righteous because of the law, then what we're saying is we don't need the sacrifice of Christ. We don't need him to die for us because we're being righteous in our own right. Also, following the law imprisons the soul. Our hearts just become so heavy because we're always doing, and we have to do these things. The fruit of the Spirit is always grown by love. It is never grown by rules. In the true gospel, we are motivated by God's love. So behavior is important, but behavior is only real. It's only congruent. It's only honest and faithful and good when Christian behavior emanates from a loving decision to follow Christ. When it emanates from we must follow the rules, it always has a bad taste. It leaves a bad taste in our mouth. There's a story about a young boy who used to leave his mother's house and go to play. And through the woods to the other side of town, he would go to play ball with the boys. And he started coming home later and later, and his mother would worry. And she told him, don't come home after dark. I need you home in time for dinner. Well, he got into those teenage years, and he just was pressing the rules. And so she sat him down and said, listen, you need to be home before dark because there's ghosts in the forest. And they're going to get you if you're not home in time. So he went back, and now he's coming home a little bit more on time, and he's worried about that. But one time, the mom didn't have everything she needed for dinner. And so she said to the son, listen, I need you to go into town to the grocery store and get me some eggs. And he said, but mom, there's ghosts in the forest. What are we going to do? I can't go in the forest. They'll get me. She said, hold on. And she went back into her back room, and she got a necklace, a medal, and she put it around him and said, look, this is a special medal. It will protect you from the ghosts. And so the boy went through the forest and got the eggs and came home, and that's the end of the story. What does the story mean? So often in religion, we are filling people with fear and manipulating them about what's right and what's wrong and who should go and what should do and creating these little magical notions of who the good ones are and who the bad ones are. Bad religion gives people medals. Good religion tells people there are no ghosts. As you study your lesson tonight, may you be set free from all legalism. May you be drawn closely and only to Christ. May you sense and know that your salvation is by his grace, by his deep love for you. And then may you go forth and just live a joyful life and not worry about who the good ones and the bad ones are. Thanks for being here tonight. Again, it is my deep, deep privilege to be your pastor. Have a great class.